They were so smart because they said, wait a second, what is more important than race? Whether or not you're a man or a woman actually dictates your political affiliation far more of a correlation than your race. So they de-emphasized racial politics and they emphasized more of a masculine machismo approach. And boy, did it work. And not only did it work, you're running up against a woman, so it's easier to kind of make that argument.
Charlie Kirk joined the PBD podcast alongside Chris Cuomo to break down the aftermath of Donald Trump's victory over Kamala Harris in the 2024 election. During the discussion, Charlie dropped a bombshell that left both Chris Cuomo and Patrick Bet-David completely speechless. He revealed the game-changing strategy Trump used to dominate the election, a tactic so effective it might reshape political campaigns forever. It was absolutely mind-blowing. Let's get into it.
Donald Trump's
2% is a lot, though.
And Donald Trump's campaign strategy, of which we helped execute on the ground in some of these states, was that, guys, don't spend your time knocking on doors about a suburban soccer mom who's weighing her options. Instead, because that takes 9 contacts to try to get her. 9 points of contact on average. Conversations, discussions, and they could be 30 minutes on it. Instead, turning point, go spend your time in very Republican areas where there are non-registered or what we call disengaged voters. People that like Trump, like his worldview. For example, the bro vote, right? And so this is where we spent our time, and we harvested, not ballot harvested, but we harvested in a very, very powerful way. At Arizona State University, for example, we registered thousands of young men to vote in fraternities. And that was way easier than us going to try to win over swing voters. And we did a little bit of that, but generally the Trump campaign was brilliant because they threw the Republican consultant playbook out. The Republican consultant playbook was spend all your time on the middle, on those like middle 15% swing voters and go all in. Trump campaign said, why don't we just make our base bigger? Why don't we just make the people who love us the most? And so what they looked at was demographics. And they realized if we can make the electorate 3% more masculine, and by the way, they were so smart to do this.
This is Susie?
This is Susie and James Blair and La Savita. And they were so smart because they said, wait a second, what is more important than race? Whether or not you're a man or a woman actually dictates your political affiliation far more of a correlation than your race. So they de-emphasized racial politics and they emphasized more of a masculine machismo approach. And boy, did it work. And not only did it work, you're running up against a woman, so it's easier to kind of make that argument. And so I don't mean to monopolize the time.
But this is really interesting. Keep going.
And so what the Trump campaign then did, the Republican consultant playbook that Karl Rove basically authored was everything is about high propensity. So there's 2 types of voters, high propensity and low propensity voters. A high propensity voter is typically college educated, lives in the suburbs. You know, they watch Chris, they watch CNN, they have an income over $100,000 a year, they have 2 kids and a picket fence, and they go to soccer games and they don't commit crimes. You know, that type of demo, right? High propensity voters is where the Republican Party has always been focused. Okay, but Trump came in and he said, no, we're going to focus on low propensity voters. The welder, the electrician, the carpenter, the police officer, or the person that's just not registered to vote. Where I thought that Donald Trump was going to win, and I wasn't as confident as anybody else, okay, was when I started to see the voter registration surge across the country. In the summer before, this last summer, new people that were registering to vote were registering at a clip 3-1 versus Democrat. In Pennsylvania, for the first time ever, in Pennsylvania, for the first time ever, we had every county in Pennsylvania, we were out registering Democrats for the first time ever. Now, mind you, what Josh Shapiro did as governor of Pennsylvania is he put in a thing called motor voter, which means you automatically get registered to vote. They thought that was going to help Democrats.
When you get your license.
When you get your driver's license. It helped Republicans because of lower, think about who's not registered to vote. It's typically lower propensity voters. And PBD, here's the kicker. Where do these people get their information? Lower propensity voters get information on TikTok. They're not watching CNN. They're not sitting, you know why? These folks are darn tired by the time they get home. They're not turning on cable news. They're watching NFL football games. They're the ones that are not going to be able to quote to you, Marbury. They're not, by the way.
It's also this.
Yeah, it's also the phone. So what Donald Trump campaign did is they hacked the 2024 election, not in a way that people would think, where they said, wait a second, everyone has a supercomputer in the right-hand pocket. Why are we worried about what CNN is saying or MSNBC is saying? Why don't we win the information war? And then finally, the kicker. They said, why don't we go on the most ambitious, over-the-top, low-propensity voter communication strategy on Theo Von, Joe Rogan, Nelk Boys, Logan Paul, influencer strategies, right? And so what they said is there's this whole reservoir.
Freaking brilliant.
And the final kicker, My mandate at Turning Point was very simple. Charlie, turn Trump supporters into voters. And that's what we did.
Trump's victory in the
Donald Trump's
2024 election came down to one simple fact.
In some of these states,
he connected with the concerns of
don't
everyday
spend your
Americans.
time knocking on doors
His
about a
campaign
suburban
focused
soccer
on
mom
issues that
who's weighing
directly
her
impacted
options.
working-class families,
Because that takes
rising
inflation, to try to get
job security,
9 points
and
of contact
economic
on
uncertainty.
Average. Conversations,
By
discussions,
positioning
and they could be
himself
30
as a
minutes on it.
defender of
Instead,
the working class,
Turning Point,
Trump
go spend
not
your
only
time in
solidified
very
support
Republican
among
areas where
white
there are
working-class
non-registered
voters,
or what we call
but also gained
disengaged voters.
significant
People that
traction
like
with
Trump,
Hispanic
like his
and black
worldview.
working
For example,
class communities.
the bro vote, right?
Analysts
And so this is where we
noted
spent our time,
that
and
his
we
emphasis on
harvested,
economic
not
struggles
ballot harvested,
and
but we
cultural
harvested in a
issues
very, very
created a
powerful way.
diverse coalition
At Arizona State
that
University,
reshaped
for
the
example,
political
we registered
landscape.
thousands of young men to
Meanwhile,
vote in fraternities.
the Democrats,
and that
led
was
by
way
Kamala
easier than us
Harris,
going to try to win
failed
over
to
swing voters.
resonate
And we did a
with
little bit of
voters.
that. But
Instead of
generally,
addressing
the
these
Trump
real
campaign was
concerns,
brilliant because
they
they
leaned
threw
into
the
a
Republican
narrative filled
consultant
with
playbook out.
fear-mongering and
Republican
divisive
consultant
rhetoric.
playbook was spend
When
all your
Harris
time
shifted
on
her
the
tone
middle,
from
on
promoting
those like middle
optimism
15%
to
swing
calling
voters
Trump
and go all in.
Hitler,
Trump campaign said,
it
why don't we
alienated
just make
many
our base
voters.
bigger?
That approach,
Why don't we just make the people
combined
who
with
love us the
blatant
most?
media
And
bias,
so what they looked at was
turned off a
demographics.
large portion of
and
the
they realized
electorate.
if we can make the electorate
media's
3% more
overwhelming bias
masculine
was impossible
and
to ignore.
By the way, they were so
Instead
smart
of
to do
holding
this.
everyone
This is
accountable,
Susie. This is
they
Susie and
focused
James
on
Blair
pushing
and
narratives that
La
supported the
Savita,
left while
and they were so
ignoring
smart
real
because they said, wait a
issues
second,
voters cared about.
What is more important than race?
This dishonesty
Whether
and
or not you're a man or
manipulation
woman actually
only
dictates your
fueled
political
skepticism
affiliation
and
far more
eroded
the
trust.
correlation than your race.
Many
So
voters
they
saw right
de-emphasized
through
racial
it,
politics
and
they
instead of helping the
emphasized
Democrats,
more of a masculine
it drove
machismo
people
approach.
further away.
Claire McCaskill, your thoughts this morning?
Well, first, I think we have to acknowledge that Donald Trump knows our country better than we do. I think he figured out that anger and, frankly, fear were way more powerful than appealing to people's better angels. That anger and fear were going to work in this election, whether you're afraid of immigrants or afraid of people who are trans. He figured that out. And I think we all thought everyone's better angels would prevail. Turns out the better angels went on vacation when Donald Trump came down the escalator, and they haven't returned. And I listen, credit to Susie Wiles and Chris Savita. And I think that is something that will be talked about for a long time. Books will be written about it. His assassination attempt helped. But keep in mind where he made the most ground, where he made up the most ground, was first with Hispanic voters, knowing how he's talked about Hispanic people in this campaign. Let that sit for a moment. The second one was, in fact, in urban areas. He did much better. That was the second area he did much better. And the last one was with young voters. I think the Democratic Party was so cocksure that young people would reject this guy because they see a different America than he does. Turns out he appealed to their grievance and their anger and their fear just as much as he was appealing to white folks in rural America that aren't college educated.
The woke media keeps pushing the narrative that Trump's campaign was driven by anger and fear. Sure, those emotions were present. People were frustrated with the state of the country. But that's not the full story. The campaign wasn't about stirring up emotions. It was about common sense. Why would Americans reward the incumbent party when the economy is struggling and the nation feels off track? It's not sexism, misogyny, or even solely about Donald Trump. It's about historical patterns. When the economy is bad, voters reject the status quo. The left kept insisting, the economy is great, but voters knew better. They were living it. Rising costs, stagnant wages, and uncertainty painted a very different picture. Instead of addressing these concerns, Democrats doubled down on a narrative that didn't resonate. Kamala Harris and the left failed to connect with voters, failed to listen, and failed to offer a compelling vision. Their losses weren't just about Trump's strategy, it was about their own shortcomings. Trump's campaign, on the other hand, was focused, effective, and forward-thinking. He offered solutions, spoke directly to the frustrations of working Americans, and proved why he was the better choice. This is why voters trusted him to lead and make the tough decisions needed to fix the government and get it back to serving the people. Let me know what you think about Charlie Kirk's take and the woke media's continued spin on these events. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this.